What's up, guys? This is Chris from MajorHiFi, and today we have a brand new, very special release from Focal called the Focal Bathys. It's their first wireless release since 2018 when the Focal Listen came out, and we're going to be comparing it to the Focal Celestee, which is a kind of interesting comparison to make. They are extremely different headphones with very different use cases, but they're kind of similarly priced. Celestee goes for just about $1,000. The Bathys is going for just about $800 right now. So, if you're shopping around in this price point for headphones, you might want to stick around. So first things first, we'll get into the Bathys. Since it's a new release, you're probably wondering what's inside of it. So let me show you. The Focal Bathys features wireless Bluetooth 5.1 technology and active noise cancellation, which I found to produce a high-quality, vacuum-sealed silence that seemed to creep up a bit higher than the cancellation in other noise-canceling over-ears. Compatible codecs include AAC and aptX adaptive. The Bathys has an impressive battery life: 30 hours connected by Bluetooth, 38 hours connected by coaxial audio cable, and 42 hours when connected by USB-C. Though smart controls aren't featured on the Bathys, you can see here that the buttons are pretty easy to use and pretty straightforward. All right, so saw the user manual. It's the first thing you see in the box, and then comes with the pretty standard semi-firm, like fabric, classic Focal case. And then inside, we got the Bathys. And if you're familiar with Focal, you might notice that looks a lot like the Focal Celestee with this sort of like asymmetrical cellular grid that's put on the back of the cans. I don't think it serves any, utility in the sound. It's just a nice aesthetic flair. I think it works. Really haven't seen headphones that look like this before. And it comes with a USB-C cable. This cable is capable of transmitting sample rates up to 192 kilohertz and a bit depth up to 24 bits. Got a pretty soft, sort of like velvety material on the top. Got like leathery, pleathery, seems like pretty high quality ear padding. And let's see what the isolation is like. Isolation is pretty extreme with these, as is, even the passive isolation. So that's a pretty cool sign. I will say that the headband pressure on these is pretty extreme. And even if you compare it over here to the Celestee, you get a sense of just how different this headband pressure is going to be. You see the Bathys squeezing in on itself. See the Celestee has a lot of room in between its speakers. Yeah, the Celestee has a very lightweight sort of fit, even though it is 430 grams. And even though the Bathys is 350 grams, there's something to the Celestee about this sort of like spring-loaded action on the cans and how far apart they are that it just sits lightly. It has less headband pressure, way less headband pressure than the Bathys. So that's for starters. I mean, that's kind of to be expected. The headband pressure is going to be there very prominently on any serious set of noise canceling headphones. Still think it could have been a little lighter. Not really a major grievance. I have a pretty fat head, so that makes me a pretty prime victim for the Bathys chomp. So things that these two have in common, they both have an aluminum magnesium 40 millimeter driver with an M-shaped dome. And an M-shaped dome basically serves for a more expansive frequency response. It deals with resonances. There are just various physical properties to it that are beneficial to creating a very accurate sound and reducing resonance. So they have pretty comparable frequency responses, where you have the Celestee coming in at 5 hertz to 23 kilohertz, and you have the Bathys coming in at 15 hertz to 22 kilohertz. So we'll get to the good part now. What do they sound like? Well, they have a pretty similar soundstage. And I was actually extremely impressed with the Bathys soundstage, especially it being a wireless headphone. I thought it was incredibly wide. I didn't think it was deep. I didn't necessarily get that full dome-like surround sound image around my head, but I didn't really mind that just because the left and the right on the Bathys is really dramatic, still adds a sense of intrigue when you're listening to music. I found that when pans got really, really dramatic, that's when you started to hear a sense of distance in it, where, certain things were sounding closer to my face than other parts of the track. And the Celestee is a similar sort of story where, again, it's more of a left-right soundstage. I don't know if I'm crazy, but I actually thought that the Bathys had a wider soundstage than the Celestee, which is interesting, again, considering that it's wireless. And Celestee still has a cool soundstage, still goes pretty far left-right. I would say that the way it deals with its highs in its image is really when you start to feel distance in the soundstage, because it has such a clear high frequency response that when really high frequencies come in, it sounds like it's coming from somewhere else around you, like not really inside the headphone, just because it's unusual for a headphone to go this high, and we'll get into that in a second. So aside from looks and soundstage, there's not a whole lot more that's very similar between these two. Actually, they have extremely different timbres, very, very different EQs on them. And this is now a comparison review. So I want to start by saying that the Bathys still has a pretty natural sound for wireless headphones. That being said, it still has a few signature qualities of being wireless, such as having a pretty warm tone. I wouldn't necessarily call it bass heavy, but it's slanted towards the bass. Definitely is pretty eager to jump on the low end of things. I found that tom-toms, for example, had this like extra physical sensation that you're certainly not getting out of the Celestee, I think. The low end on the Celestee, on the other hand, it's there. I would say that you hear it a little more than you feel it, though, which isn't the case with the Bathys. You're going to feel those lows on the Bathys. You're going to feel those vibrations. I've seen online that people say the Celestee has a punchy low end, and I actually think that this is an interesting observation to make, because I think that the way that the Celestee deals with its highs is actually what influences what people are calling a punchy low end, in that the transients of the kick drums, as in, the actual moment that the pedal is hitting the kick drum, that comes through at a very high frequency and kind of informs how we're hearing the low frequency decay that's coming after it. And I think that the Celestee is definitely picking up on that high pitch transient and emphasizing it. And then when people hear that in a kick drum, they say, oh, the lows are punchy. And subjectively, that's true, and I would agree with them. I think that the high end on the Celestee is definitely informing the low end. Low end is still there, pretty natural. It's not going to shake your head off. Not that the Bathys low end is going to shake your head off either, but it is definitely favoring lower end of the frequency spectrum. So when it comes to mid-range, once again, these two are somewhat opposites. I found that the Bathys has very strong low mids and pretty scooped out high mids. But one thing that I do like about how the Bathys is handling those mids is that a lot of the times when you already have a kind of pumped up bass on a headphone and then the low mids are coming in as well, you get this kind of like imprecise, muddy sound. The Bathys avoids that because, again, it's not making really serious EQ tweaks at any one given point in the spectrum. Kind of touches the lows all throughout the frequency spectrum rather than making too dramatic of an adjustment at any one particular given point. And the Celestee still has the low mids, but really, and I would say maybe the defining feature of the Celestee is high mids, which I can't stop calling fiery. They come across really strong, and it's going to satisfy a lot of treble heads like myself. I found that when I was listening to Cockatoo Twins and the Sundays, both of those pretty trebly bands with female singers with very high voices. This was really bringing like the air out of their voices, the little squeals that are almost imperceptible on some headphones, hi-hats and snare drums, and the reverb that ensued from them was really well expressed, felt very big. So getting into the highs, the Bathys has them present enough to avoid having a muffled sound. Hi-hats come through. The way I would put it, though, would be with a ride cymbal, which dings a little more than it rings. And what I mean by that is just, I would say around 10 kilohertz. There might be some sort of boost after the scoop that's going on in the high mids, but the highs really start to taper off when you start going, I would say, above, I would estimate 12 kilohertz. It doesn't have the really, really fine details of vocal air or really high-pitched reverb. Again, the Bathys isn't so much about an elevated, airy sound. It's that really warm, secure, soft sort of sound. And even though I do like to see a lot of high-end in headphones, it makes a lot of sense to me why the Bathys sounds like this. Seems like it's an easy listening headphone. So the Celestee, on the other hand, it's a powerhouse in its highs, and it continues where it left off in its high mids, and maybe not as strong in the highs as the high mids, but still very present highs, way more than a lot of headphones, most headphones. It's pretty much immediately apparent the second that you start listening on these. I was listening to the album Reset by Panda Bear, which has a lot of kind of weird electronic squeals in it. And I noticed that when clip distortion effects were present, I was hearing those frequencies that were, really almost impossibly high, above 15 kilohertz. So super strong high end on the Celestee. The Bathys has a much more rounded out, attenuated sort of high end to keep that warm sound signature intact. It's a very comfortable high end, whereas the Celestee is a fiery high end. So guys, thanks for coming here. Thanks for watching. Remember to like and subscribe if you liked this review. Links to buy both the Bathys and the Celestee are down below. So is the link to the review of the Bathys, as well as my comparison review in writing on MajorHiFi. So thanks again. I'll see you next time.